Martha Peet was born in an igloo in a community known as Taloyoak, where 4 other families lived. Martha grew up with her parents, who were closely tied to the land. Her parents were nomads and found it difficult to stay in one place for a long time. As a result, she grew up traveling with them by dog sled.
This is a story about how Inuit started to travel to the cities when there was no way of traveling on the land other than by dog team many years ago. This is traveling to the cities for medical help, and we had to fly by plane from our community. We would land in Cambridge Bay for fuel up, and then the plane left for Yellowknife and we fuel again. And then we would continue on a different plane to Edmonton from Yellowknife. Them days, the Inuit did not travel by plane for pleasure, but only for medical. My first airplane ride was from my home community of Taloyoak to Edmonton, Alberta. When I was 12 years old, I was diagnosed with TB, and I was diagnosed with TB at age 12 by a traveling X-ray team. They traveled to the communities, X-rayed everybody, and there was quite a few people with TB. And for those treatments, we had to fly to Edmonton for treatment. Those who lived in the Eastern Arctic were sent to Montreal for medical treatment. And those people who lived in the Inuktitut region and Western Arctic Nunavut, they were sent to Edmonton. Those with TB were all flown together on a plane to be treated at a hospital in Edmonton, Charles Camso Hospital. I was put in a large room with other Inuit who had TB at the hospital. I spent 6 months not allowed to put my feet on the floor. I was not allowed to walk anywhere, not even get out of bed. Not allowed to walk, just using bedpans and rolling from one side of my body to the other side of the bed so the staff can change my bedding sheets and blankets. After 6 months, I was allowed to walk around for 15 minutes a day. I remember falling on the floor when I put my feet on the floor. I just had no strength. I had no muscle or strength to hold myself in a walking position. I could not walk. I was 12 years old. As I learned to walk again, I had my hands and arms against the wall as I felt like falling. For some weeks, my body was that weak. I was flown back to my community of Taloyoak after a year of treatment for TB at Charles Camso Hospital. Some Inuit who were sent to the south for medical treatment never returned home. The families were never notified when they have passed away or told where their relatives are being treated at. Could be in Ontario, Manitoba, Alberta. It could be anywhere, but their own families, their parents didn't know where they were. My dad was flown out of my home community for medical treatment in the early 1960s. While he was being medevaced on a small plane, we were notified that he passed away en route to a medical center. It was some 30 years later we learned that he had been buried in Cambridge Bay, which is only a 3-hour flight between Taloyoak and Cambridge Bay. That's not very far away. All those years in between, we always thought he was buried somewhere in Edmonton. All those years, his burial coffin was only 3 hours away by flight from our home community. And it was then when the government came up with the program to find where the Inuit were buried when they were sick, when they passed away. That was when my dad's coffin was found in Cambridge Bay. That's where he had been buried. And then we were also asked if we would like his body brought back to our home community. My mom had decided no, leave him where he is. He has been resting his body in Cambridge Bay for all these years. So his body was never brought back to our home community. But in so many ways, this has taught us the medical treatment nowadays. They can keep sending you out to Edmonton or Yellowknife for medical treatment, take you back home after treatment. And after all these years of experiences where the bodies were never brought back, so many Inuit in the communities nowadays decide not to be going out anymore for treatments in fear of being buried somewhere else. So they prefer to pass away when they're very ill with cancer, where they know it was just a matter of time. They ask to be not sent out anymore by medevac to largest cities for medical treatment. They just want to spend the remaining time they have with their families. And they get well taken care of by other family members. So many Inuit nowadays prefer to do that. This is a very modern way of traveling. This was early 1960s. But what about prior to that? I remember when I was very young, a child, the plane would fly over the community and drop things by parachute. And dropping things by parachute, it was a mail or parcels for the southern people who live in that community. It could be pictures, letters, or maybe cooking ingredients that they're used to having, but they no longer have them in the community because they were not sold in the communities. So it was always an exciting time to hear news from their home communities in the South. And sometimes a plane would fly by. Not very often, it's this dropping things from parachute or dropping things from the plane happened maybe once or twice a year. Because 7 days we didn't have a plane land anywhere. There were no planes landing into the communities because there was no landing strip. And sometimes they would drop off a box of candies, open box, and dump the box over the community for the children to have some candies, because the candies were not sold in the store. So it was a real treat for us if we found one, or some kids might find maybe 5 or 10 candies. These were real exciting times for the children. A well-known author, Michael Kuzuak, wrote a book who has written children's books. And one of his books is called A Baseball Bat for Christmas. And that was how he got the baseball bat. It was parachuted, and it was his. And also he talked about how we got our first Christmas trees up in the Arctic. Our very first Christmas trees. We didn't get them. The Inuit people didn't get them. There would be a Christmas tree maybe at a church, and it was parachuted over the community, and the people would go and pick it up and take it to the church, and that was where it was decorated. Those days when the planes first started flying over, it was very exciting because we had never seen planes. And then a few years later, special planes started coming in. A float plane belonging to Hudson's Bay Company would come in and land in the water. And the area managers for the Hudson's Bay Company would come in to have meetings with the bay manager. And then the RCMP plane started coming in about once or twice a year, and they would have skis, and they landed on the ice. Some parts of the ocean on top of the ice was cleared up with shovels, and it would be big enough, long enough for the plane to land on skis. Those were new things that were happening. I remember seeing a lady for the first time who came from Ontario. She was our very first school teacher. Her name was Isabel Plant, and she taught in my community for so many years. But I remember seeing her for the first time. She had red around her lips, and we wondered what that was. We later learned there was more access to magazines being sent to the people who lived in the communities who originated from down south. So we later learned that was lipstick, and it was to make you look pretty. All the little girls, all of us, all excited, wondering what it was like to have lipstick. So that was very exciting. Those were exciting times. Although there might have been only 100 people in the community, that was a big community compared to the early 1950s, when there were only 3 or 4 families living in the community when it first became a community chosen by the Hudson's Bay Company, where they would build their store.
Multicultural is located on Treaty 1 territory, the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the national homeland of the Red River Métis.